The morning sun rose slow over the plains, stretching long shadows across the dry earth. The wind moved soft through the sagebrush, whispering secrets only the land could understand. Out here, silence was a language of its own, and Eli Turner spoke it better than most. Before we start, subscribe now so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love hearing from you, and always read every message. He stood by the corral fence, hammer in hand, fixing the same gate that had been giving him trouble since spring. Every strike echoed through the stillness, steady as his breathing. Beyond the fence, his cattle grazed lazily, tails flicking at flies, unaware of how quiet the world had become. Willow Creek was 10 miles east, a dusty town that never changed much, a place where folks minded their own business and the past stayed buried if you let it. Eli liked it that way. He'd seen enough noise and heartbreak for one lifetime. He set the hammer down, wiped his brow, and looked to the horizon. Heat waves shimmered above the prairie grass, the kind of mirage that could trick a man into seeing ghosts. Maybe that's why, for a split second, he thought he saw movement out there, a dark speck cutting through the morning haze. He squinted, shading his eyes. No, it wasn't a trick. A rider was coming fast, too fast for a casual traveler. Dust rose behind the horse like a storm cloud chasing the dawn. Eli's heartbeat picked up. Out here, uninvited riders rarely brought good news. He reached for his rifle, leaning against the fence, but didn't lift it. Not yet. Instead, he stood still, the wind tugging at his hat brim as the sound of hooves grew louder, sharper. Something was coming. Someone. And deep down, Eli Turner knew. The quiet life he'd built was about to shatter like glass in a gunfight. The thunder of hooves grew louder, rolling across the open plains like distant gunfire. A lone rider was tearing through the dust, bent low over the saddle, her silhouette blurred by the morning glare. The horse's muscles rippled with each desperate stride. Not the pace of a traveler, but someone being chased. Eli Turner stayed where he was, the wind brushing across his face, grit biting his lips. The air carried that tense hum that comes right before something breaks. He could almost feel it in his bones. Trouble was closing in. The rider swayed slightly as she neared the fence line, guiding the horse with a firm hand. When she finally pulled up, the animal reared and snorted, foam streaking its neck. Dust rolled around her like smoke, hiding her face beneath a wide-brimmed hat and a dark bandana. Eli didn't move. "You're a long way from town," he said evenly. The rider didn't answer. She glanced back toward the horizon, as if expecting someone, or something, to appear behind her. Nothing but wind and sunlight. Yet her hand stayed close to her holster. Eli's grip tightened on the fence post. "You lost?" The woman's voice came quiet, low but steady. "No, just out of time." That made Eli pause. He studied her closely now. The worn boots, the torn coat, the horse trembling beneath her. Whoever she was, she'd been riding hard and far. The wind picked up, swirling more dust between them, and for a heartbeat, they just stood there. Two strangers caught in a storm that hadn't yet arrived. Then she lifted her head slightly, eyes dark beneath the brim. "Wait," she said, voice breaking the silence. "I take it off." Eli froze, breath caught in his throat. And in that one strange sentence he knew. His day, his peace, and maybe his whole life were about to change forever. The horse pawed the dirt restlessly, nostrils flaring, eyes wild with the strain of the long ride. The woman swung one leg over and slid down from the saddle, her boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. Dust swirled around her ankles as the wind died to a low hum. Eli Turner didn't speak. He just watched, steady, cautious, like a man facing down a rattlesnake and waiting to see if it'll strike. The woman adjusted her hat, then tugged the reins loose, letting the horse breathe. She moved slow, deliberate. Every gesture carried the weight of exhaustion and wariness, as if she'd been running too long and trusting too little. "Don't mean to trespass," she said finally, her voice hoarse but certain. "Didn't have much choice." Eli nodded slightly but didn't lower his guard. "Nobody rides that hard unless they're running from something," he said. Her eyes lifted, sharp and guarded. "Maybe I'm running to something." The silence that followed was thick as storm clouds. A tumbleweed rolled between them, scraping over dry earth, the kind of quiet that always comes before a revelation. Then, without warning, she reached for her neck. "Wait," she whispered again, slower this time. "I take it off." Eli's pulse kicked. His hand brushed against the rifle leaning on the fence post. But instead of a weapon, she pulled loose the knot of her bandana and let it fall. The cloth fluttered to the ground like a surrender flag, and the face beneath it stopped Eli cold. He knew that face. 3 years had passed since he'd seen it last. The same eyes, fierce and alive, the same small scar above her left cheek. The woman before him wasn't a stranger at all. It was Clara McKay, the woman who'd once ridden out of his life without a word, and who, by all accounts, should have never come back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind sighing through the corral posts and the nervous shuffle of the horses' hooves. Dust hung in the air between them, soft as smoke, and Eli Turner felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Not from tremor or storm, but from memory. "Clara McKay," he said finally, his voice low and uncertain, like the name itself might vanish if he said it too loud. "You're supposed to be gone?" She cut in, a wry, tired smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah, that's what they all think." She looked different, harder around the edges, eyes older than her years. The girl who once laughed beneath the cottonwoods was gone. What stood before him now was someone shaped by dust, danger, and distance. Eli leaned against the fence, trying to steady the storm building in his chest. "Last I heard, you took a train east. Said you were done with this place." Clara's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "I was, until the law gave me a reason to come back." Eli frowned. "The law?" She nodded slowly, pulling off her gloves. "Marshall's been chasing me since Abilene. They say I robbed the Whitmore Bank. I didn't. But the man who did made sure my name was on the warrant." Her voice cracked for just a heartbeat before she swallowed it down. Eli studied her, jaw tight. He'd seen lies before, in outlaws, drifters, and gamblers who'd passed through Willow Creek. But Clara's eyes told something else. Something raw. He set the rifle aside. "You know I can't fight the law, Clara." She looked at him then, really looked, and whispered, "I didn't come here for that. I came here because you're the only one who might still believe me." The silence that followed felt heavier than any thunder. And just like that, Eli Turner's quiet life had cracked wide open by the return of the one woman he thought he'd buried in his past. Clara paced the edge of the corral, boots crunching over dry soil. Her horse snorted behind her, restless, picking up on her unease. The wind had shifted, cooler now, carrying a hint of rain or trouble, maybe both. "I didn't plan on coming here," she said, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Didn't even know if you'd still be alive out here." Eli folded his arms, gaze steady. "Well, I am. Barely. Now tell me why a marshal's chasing you halfway across the plains." She drew a slow breath. "It started in Whitmore 2 weeks back. I took a bookkeeping job at the bank. Clean work, steady pay. Then one morning, the vault was empty, and the manager was gone. They said I was his accomplice. By the time I knew what hit me, there was a price on my head." Eli's brow furrowed. "You expect me to believe that?" Her glare cut sharp. "Believe what you want, but I didn't steal a dime. Someone set me up, and now they're riding my name into the ground." A silence fell heavy between them. The only sound was the creak of the barn door and the low moan of the wind over the grasslands. Clara lowered her voice. "The marshal's got my trail. He'll be here by sundown. I just need a few hours, Eli, to rest to think. Then I'll be gone. He hesitated, searching her face for the truth, but the years between them had turned that into a dangerous guessing game. Finally, he nodded once. The barn's open. She looked at him, not with gratitude, but with something deeper. Regret. The barn door groaned as Eli pushed it open, hinges crying like old ghosts. Inside, the air was thick with hay and the faint scent of horses. Familiar, grounding, safe. Clara stepped in first, her boots stirring dust that caught the light from the setting sun. Eli lit a lantern and hung it from a beam. A soft glow spread through the space, chasing shadows into corners. He motioned toward a pile of hay near the back. Ain't much, but it's dry. You can rest there till morning. Clara gave a faint smile. Better than a jail cell. He didn't answer. Instead, he busied himself with a bucket of water, trying to ignore the weight of her presence. A ghost from another life standing in his barn like no time had passed at all. How long you been running? He asked finally. Since Whitmore, she said. Every town I passed through, someone knew my name. Either the marshal's talkin', or the man who framed me wants me caught worse than the law does. Eli looked up. You think it's someone from your past? Clara hesitated. I think it's someone I trusted. That landed like a hammer blow. He said nothing, only nodded, jaw tight. The wind outside whistled through the cracks in the walls, a reminder of how close danger could ride. She removed her coat and laid it across a bale, then met his eyes. I'll be gone before sunrise. You won't have to lie for me. Eli shook his head slowly. If a man's gonna lie, it ought to be for something worth it. Their eyes locked, old pain mixing with something unspoken, something that hadn't died even after all the years apart. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the distance. Inside, neither of them moved. Because sometimes, the quiet before a storm feels safer than what follows. Night came slow over Willow Creek, wrapping the land in quiet shadows. The lantern in Eli's barn flickered against the wooden beams, painting soft, trembling halos of light. Outside, coyotes called from the hills, their cries echoing across the open plains like ghosts that couldn't rest. Eli sat on an overturned bucket, hands clasped loosely, staring at the dirt floor. Across from him, Clara lay back against a hay bale, hat tipped low over her eyes. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy with everything they hadn't said years ago. Finally, Eli broke it. You remember the cottonwood by the river? Where we used to meet after sunset? Clara's lips curved, just barely. Hard to forget. You carved our initials there like you thought the tree'd live forever. He smirked faintly. It's still there. So's the carving. She looked up then, meeting his gaze through the lantern glow. You kept it? Couldn't bring myself to cut it down, he said. Some things deserve to stay. For a moment, the years melted away. 2 kids under the open sky, making promises bigger than they could keep. Then Clara's expression hardened, reality sliding back into place. Those were easier days, she murmured, before life started keeping score. Eli nodded slowly. Life always keeps score. We just stop looking at the numbers. The wind outside picked up, rattling the barn walls. Both of them turned at the same time, a reflex born of too many bad nights and close calls. Nothing there. Just wind and darkness. Still, Clara's hand hovered near her gun. Old habits, she muttered. Eli looked at her for a long beat. Some habits keep you alive. The lantern hissed softly, its flame trembling. The world outside was sleeping, but inside that barn, 2 restless souls sat wide awake, caught somewhere between the past they lost and the danger waiting just beyond the dark. The night deepened, and the lantern's glow shrank to a faint, golden pulse. Outside, the wind had quieted, leaving a silence so thick that even their breathing seemed too loud. Clara sat up, brushing hay from her sleeve. Her eyes were softer now, but weary, like someone who'd been carrying too much for too long. Eli hadn't moved, though the weight of her silence pressed on him harder than any storm. Finally, she spoke. I didn't just come back because of the marshal, Eli. He looked up, cautious. No? She shook her head slowly. I came back because I couldn't keep running from what I left behind. Her gaze lingered on him, steady and sad. You. Eli swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around his hat brim. You made your choice, Clara. You rode east and never looked back. I did, she admitted. But every mile I rode, I heard your voice in the wind. Every sunrise I thought about this place, about what we were before everything went wrong. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. I thought time would make it easier. It didn't. It just made the missing worse. Eli leaned forward, eyes shadowed. And now you're here, wanted by the law, bringing your trouble to my door. What am I supposed to do with that? Clara's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she whispered, Maybe I just needed to see if you'd still open the door. The barn went still again, the air charged with everything neither dared to say. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly on the horizon. A storm building, just like the one between them. The night air turned sharp, colder than before. The first drops of rain began to fall, soft, uncertain, tapping against the barn roof like a warning. Eli stood by the door, staring out into the darkness. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a coyote yipped, then went silent. And then he heard it. Faint at first, just a distant rhythm carried by the wind. The steady pounding of hooves. More than one horse, maybe 3, maybe 4, riding hard. Clara stiffened instantly. They found me. Eli's hand went to the rifle leaning by the door. He didn't raise it, not yet, but the way his fingers gripped the barrel told her everything. How far out? He asked quietly. Close, she whispered. They've been tracking me for days. I doubled back, took dry creek beds to lose 'em. Guess I wasn't fast enough. The hoofbeats grew louder now, echoing across the open plains, rolling through the night like thunder chasing lightning. Eli blew out the lantern, plunging the barn into shadow. They see light. They'll come straight here. They stood still, side by side in the darkness, listening. The horses slowed, maybe 100 yards out. Then, voices, muffled but clear enough. Men calling orders, reins snapping. Clara's breath hitched. Eli, if they find me here. He cut her off with a quiet shake of his head. Don't talk. Just breathe. Rain began to pour harder now, masking the sounds outside but not the fear inside. The hoofbeats circled the ranch once, fading, then returning. Slower this time. Searching. Clara gripped her holster. Eli's jaw clenched tight. And in that heartbeat of silence before the next sound, both of them knew. The past had finally caught up to the present. The rain came harder now, hammering the barn roof in steady rhythm. Lightning flashed in the distance, casting quick, white ghosts across the plains. Eli stood just inside the doorway, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the dark shapes moving near the ridge. Clara was a few paces behind him, her breath shallow, her hand hovering near her gun belt but not drawing. The flicker of lightning caught her face. Fear, pride, and something softer beneath. They'll come to the barn first, Eli murmured. Tracks lead straight here. Clara nodded. Then you'd better hand me over before they ask questions. He turned sharply. That what you think I'm gonna do? Her voice trembled. You should. You got too much to lose. I'm not worth another fight. Eli looked at her for a long moment. The woman who'd once ridden off without goodbye, now standing soaked and cornered in his barn. Somewhere deep inside, he felt that same ache he'd buried years ago start to rise again. I don't turn folks away, he said finally. Not even ones who broke me. Clara's eyes glistened. Eli. He cut her off, tone low and firm. You stay behind the stalls. If they ask, I ain't seen you. Let me handle it. She shook her head fiercely. No, you'll get yourself shot. Eli chambered around and stepped toward the door. Ain't the first time I've looked down a barrel for someone I cared about. Outside, the hoofbeats stopped. Voices called out through the rain. Eli froze, hand tightening on the rifle. This was the moment, the choice between safety and the truth. And as thunder cracked overhead, he knew, no matter what came next, nothing about this night would end clean. The barn door rattled under the force of the wind, rain slicing through the gaps like cold needles. Eli stood motionless, the rifle steady in his hands, his shadow barely visible in the dim flicker of lightning. Outside, the marshal's men called again, closer this time. "Turner! We know she came this way. Open up!" Eli didn't move. His jaw clenched, heartbeat thudding in his ears. Clara stepped out from behind the hay bales, rainwater dripping from her coat. Her eyes met his, calm, steady, and full of something he hadn't seen in her for years. Peace. "Eli," she said softly, "don't do this. You'll ruin everything you've built." "I ain't letting them take you," he said. She smiled faintly. "You already did more than anyone ever has. But this is mine to face." He shook his head. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." She reached up, untying her hat and letting it fall to the dirt. Her hair spilled loose, damp and wild under the faint light from the storm. "I've been running too long. I'm done hiding." Another flash of lightning lit her face, fearless now. No longer the outlaw, but the woman he once loved, finally standing tall. Clara touched his arm gently, her voice a whisper. "Thank you for believing me, even when you shouldn't have." And before he could stop her, she pulled the barn door open. Wind and rain rushed in, wrapping around her like silver mist. Eli's throat tightened as she stepped into the storm, walking straight toward the waiting lawman. Her shadow stretching long across the mud, swallowed by the moonlight. He didn't call after her. He just watched. Because sometimes, letting someone go is the only way to set them free. By the time dawn broke over Willow Creek, the storm had passed. The sky burned with soft streaks of orange and silver, the kind of light that made the world look washed clean. Though Eli Turner knew better. Some storms didn't leave mud. They left memories. He stood at the edge of his porch, coffee steaming in his hands, eyes fixed on the empty horizon. The land was quiet again, still dripping from the night's rain. The only sign of what had happened was the trail of hoofprints leading away from the ranch. 4 sets heading east, and one smaller set beside them. Clara's. He'd stayed awake long after she left, listening to the echo of her voice, the whisper of her name in the wind. At some point, the hoofbeats faded, swallowed by distance, or fate. He didn't know which. Now, as the sun climbed higher, Eli set his cup down and walked toward the cottonwood tree by the river. The bark was rough beneath his hand, and there, half hidden beneath the moss, were the initials he'd carved years ago. E.T. plus C.M., a promise made by 2 kids who didn't know how fast the world could turn. He traced the letters gently, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "She kept her word," he muttered. She came back. A hawk cried somewhere overhead, soaring free into the bright morning sky. Eli turned toward the open range, hat in hand, the wind tugging softly at his coat. He didn't know if he'd ever see Clara again. Maybe she'd clear her name. Maybe she wouldn't. But one thing was certain. The woman who'd ridden into his life again had left it changed forever. And as the sun spilled over the plains, Eli Turner whispered to the dawn, "Some things you can't outrun, and some you just shouldn't try to." Rancher Eli Turner's quiet life shatters when Clara McKay, his lost love turned fugitive, rides in claiming she's been framed. As lawmen close in, Eli risks everything to protect her. But Clara chooses to face her fate, walking into the storm to end her running. By dawn, she's gone. Eli's heart remains, forever changed by the woman who returned only to set him free. Thanks for riding with us, friends. If you want more Western love stories, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.